I don't think anyone sets out to make their daughter feel like a mistake, but somehow that's what my family managed to do, over and over again. I'm 29 now, living alone in a quiet apartment 2 states away from where I grew up. It's the first time in my life I've had real silence, not the kind that buzzes with tension, but the kind that feels like peace. I was the middle child, sandwiched between an older brother who could do no wrong and a younger sister who got away with everything. Our house always looked normal from the outside. Neat lawn, Sunday dinners, birthday cakes. But behind closed doors, everything was different. And somehow, even when things had nothing to do with me, I was the one who got blamed. If my brother failed a class, my parents asked why I didn't help him study. If my sister got caught lying, I was accused of setting a bad example. If mom and dad were arguing, I must have done something to stress them out. I spent years asking myself, am I really that difficult to love? I wasn't perfect, sure. But I was quiet, kept my grades up. I cooked dinner when mom was tired and stayed out of the way when dad was in one of his moods. I learned to shrink myself early, to take blame before it was handed to me, just to keep the peace. I thought that if I was just good enough, eventually they'd see me, understand me, maybe even appreciate me. But they never did. I grew up feeling like a placeholder for everyone's disappointment, like I was born to absorb whatever emotions no one else wanted to deal with. And no matter how old I got, no matter what I achieved, it was never enough to erase the role they'd cast me in. Then something happened, something that made everything crystal clear. And one day I'd had enough. Some of my earliest memories are of being punished for things I didn't do. I remember when I was 6 and my brother, Jake, knocked over a lamp in the living room. It was this old glass thing my mom loved, ugly and dusty but sentimental, which basically meant untouchable. I was in the kitchen when I heard the crash. By the time I ran in, Jake was standing there, red-faced and guilty. The base was cracked, pieces everywhere. But when mom came rushing in, eyes wide, the first thing out of her mouth wasn't, "What happened?" It was, "What did you do, Ava?" Froze. I didn't even try to argue. I just said, "I didn't." And that was enough for her to cut me off. "Don't lie," she snapped. "I'm so sick of your stories." I got sent to my room without dinner while Jake watched TV in the next room like nothing had happened. I cried quietly into my pillow that night, not because of the punishment, but because I was genuinely confused. How could they not see what was right in front of them? That wasn't an isolated event. It was a pattern that repeated itself in different ways, in different rooms, over different years. Once, my younger sister, Leah, got caught drawing on the walls with crayon. Bright blue scribbles up and down the hallway. When Dad saw it, he didn't ask who did it. He just yelled out my name. "Ava! What the hell were you doing while this happened? Do you ever watch your sister?" I was 8. She was 3. But somehow it was still my fault. I think I learned very early on that explanations didn't matter. The more I tried to defend myself, the more they twisted it into attitude or backtalk. So eventually I just stopped. I started taking the blame like medicine, something bitter and inevitable. I figured if I just accepted it, maybe it would pass quicker. Maybe it would hurt less. But it didn't. School, I was quiet, polite. Teachers loved me. Friends' parents called me well-behaved and sweet. I remember wishing my own parents could see me the way other adults did. But no matter what I did right outside the house, it never translated inside it. I became the default scapegoat. If anything went wrong, even if I wasn't in the room, somehow it led back to me. A missing receipt. My fault. Dog peed on the carpet. I must have let him in. Leah stubbed her toe. I distracted her. It was exhausting. Not just because I kept getting in trouble, but because I started to believe it. I started to internalize the idea that maybe I really was the problem. Maybe something about me just set people off. Maybe I really was careless, selfish, dramatic. It didn't matter that I was careful, that I tried so hard to be the opposite. If enough people told me I was wrong, then maybe I was. I spent so much of my childhood walking on eggshells I didn't even realize I'd stopped feeling safe in my own home. My parents didn't hit us, but honestly, the silence after an accusation felt worse. The way they'd glance at each other and sigh, like I was some lost 'cause they were just tolerating. Eventually I stopped talking much at all. Why bother? It was like I existed just to absorb everyone else's anger, like I was the emotional sponge of the house. They wrung me out whenever they needed to. That's when I first started fantasizing about disappearing. Not in a dramatic way, just gone. Out of reach. Where no one could blame me for anything ever again. If childhood was when the blaming started, then my teenage years were when it sharpened into something heavier. More constant, more exhausting. It wasn't just the occasional punishment or misattributed mistake anymore. It was a daily current, running quietly underneath everything. I was the problem, and they expected me to fix everything without ever acknowledging me for it. By the time I was 14, expectations doubled, but support disappeared. Suddenly, I was supposed to babysit Leah every afternoon, help Jake with his college applications, keep my grades up, keep my mouth shut, and somehow never ask for anything. If I slipped on one thing, even just once, it was a catastrophe. One night, I came home late from a study group because my math teacher offered extra help before midterms. I texted Mom, but apparently she didn't see it. When I walked through the door, her first words were, "So you've decided curfews don't apply to you anymore?" Dad just looked over his glasses and added, "We can't trust you with anything." I hadn't even taken my shoes off. Meanwhile, Jake had been sneaking out to parties every weekend, and Leah had started stealing from stores with her friends. But whenever they got caught, my parents were all soft sighs and, "They're just figuring things out." For me, there was no room to figure anything out. I was expected to know better, be better, and smile while doing it. I tried to speak up once. Just once. I was 16. It was after another one of Leah's meltdowns where she threw a glass at the wall and blamed me for snapping at her, when I had literally just asked if she'd done her homework. My mom told me I should have known not to provoke her. That night I finally said it. I'm tired of being blamed for everything. I didn't do anything wrong. The silence that followed was worse than yelling. My father gave me this long, measured look, then said, "Maybe you need to take a look at your attitude, Ava. You're not exactly easy to live with." I wish I could say I fought back, that I stood my ground. But I just stood there, throat tight, trying not to cry. Trying not to give them the satisfaction. I remember thinking, how can they twist everything like this? How can I exist in the same house and still feel so unseen? That's the thing about being the scapegoat. You're both invisible and under a microscope. They never see you, but they see everything you do wrong. The tone of your voice. The sigh you didn't mean to let out. The silence you thought would keep the peace but somehow still gets labeled as passive-aggressive. I started getting anxiety attacks around then. Not that I knew what they were. I'd feel short of breath, my hands would shake, and my chest would feel tight like I couldn't breathe all the way in. When I tried to tell Mom, she said, "It's probably just hormones. You've always been dramatic." So I stopped trying to explain. I threw myself into schoolwork, thinking maybe if I got good enough grades, they'd finally see me as something other than a burden. I got into AP classes, volunteered, stayed up till 2 a.m. editing essays. I ran on coffee and guilt. When I made the honor roll 3 semesters in a row, no one said a word. Not even a good job. But when Jake dropped out of his second year of college, my parents scrambled to reassure him. Bought him a used car to help him reset. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not an explosion, but a quiet collapse. I realized nothing I did would ever be enough for them. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they had already decided who I was. No matter how much I changed or improved, I was always going to be the one to blame when things went wrong. I started to feel invisible and yet constantly in the spotlight, for the wrong reasons. I stopped bringing friends over. I stopped sharing anything real. I became 2 versions of myself. The one everyone saw at school, smiling and put together, and the one at home, constantly bracing for impact. I was tired. So tired. But I didn't know yet that I was allowed to leave. That the weight wasn't mine to carry forever. That truth would come later. Much later. By the time I hit my late 20s, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had outgrown the role they'd boxed me into. I had my own life by then. I was living in the city, renting a small apartment, working in marketing at a company I didn't love but didn't hate. I had co-workers who respected me, friends who liked me, and for the first time, a sense of control over my day-to-day life. But somehow, my family still had their grip on me. I'd drive down a few times a year for holidays, pretending things were better, playing the part. I kept things surface level, smiled when I didn't want to, and avoided any topic that might light the match. Still, it was never enough. "Your mom's been crying," my dad would text out of nowhere. "She says you're distant. You should call her more." Jake could go weeks without so much as a birthday text, and no one batted an eye. But if I skipped a call or replied late, suddenly I was the reason Mom felt unloved. The reason Dad was in a bad mood. The reason Leah was struggling. "You're the glue, Ava," Mom once said through a sniffle, like it was some kind of compliment. And when the glue pulls away, everything falls apart. I wasn't glue. I was a band-aid. Something they slapped over their own mess and blamed when it couldn't hold. The final straw came last Christmas. I debated not going. My anxiety always kicked up before family visits, but this time it was worse than usual. Still, guilt won like it always did, and I showed up with store-bought pies and polite smiles, ready to endure another few days. Started off okay. Tense but quiet. Then Jake brought up something about Leah's recent breakup and joked that I probably had talked her into dumping him. I laughed it off, but Leah suddenly exploded, said I was always interfering, always acting like I'm better than everyone. I stared at her, stunned. I hadn't even spoken to her in weeks. And then it happened. Mom stood up, her face tight. "You know what, Ava? This kind of stuff always happens when you're around. We were doing fine until you showed up." And blinked. "What do you mean? I haven't even said anything." Dad cut in then, low and tired, like he was worn down by my existence. "It's the tension. The energy you bring. We all feel it. You can't keep acting like you're not part of the problem." No one defended me. Not Jake. Not Leah. No one. I was 30 years old, and my parents were still blaming me for everyone else's chaos like I was some emotional lightning rod they never asked for but refused to let go of. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not angry, just final. I stood up, walked to the coat rack, put on my jacket. No one stopped me. I picked up the pies I had brought and left them on the table. "You can keep these," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. For once, I didn't feel small. Felt clear. No one followed me to the door. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time afterward. The house behind me glowed with warm lights and fake joy, but I felt like I'd finally woken up from a very long, very painful sleep. That was the moment I realized. This will never stop unless I make it stop. After that Christmas, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or slam doors. I didn't send angry texts or write long explanations. I just got quiet. And I started planning. I knew better than to try and make them understand. I'd spent decades trying to explain myself to people who were never listening. So this time I made a different choice. I didn't announce anything. I didn't give them a chance to twist my words or guilt me back into place. I started with the logistics. A few months after the holidays, I found a job in a different city, 2 states away. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough, and more importantly, it gave me distance. I gave my landlord notice, packed what I needed, and sold or donated the rest. I didn't tell a soul. I changed my number the day I moved. No forwarding address. No dramatic message. I deactivated Facebook, blocked my family on Instagram, wiped what I could. It wasn't about spite, it was about space. Real space. The kind where no one could reach me just to unload their mess onto me again. I rented a small studio in a quiet neighborhood. My first night there, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and felt nothing. Not relief, not guilt, not joy. Just silence. For someone who grew up constantly absorbing other people's emotions, silence was unfamiliar. But it wasn't empty, it was calm. No one noticed for days. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a passive-aggressive email. And weirdly, that hurt. Not because I wanted them to chase me, but because it confirmed everything I feared growing up, that I was only valuable when I was present to be blamed. The moment I stepped out of reach, it was like I ceased to exist. Still, every day that passed felt a little bit lighter. I could wake up without checking my phone for drama. I could go to the grocery store without bracing for a surprise confrontation. Could breathe. It was the quietest goodbye I'd ever given anyone. No tears. No good lucks. No last conversations to hold on to. Just left. And for the first time in my life, leaving didn't feel like running away. Felt like coming home to myself. The first few weeks after I left were blissfully quiet. I didn't realize how much tension I had been carrying until it was gone. My shoulders felt strange without the constant tightness. I didn't wake up dreading the sound of my phone. I didn't spend my evenings rehearsing imaginary conversations or bracing for blame. It was peaceful, almost eerily so. But then the confusion crept in. There was no big confrontation, no final chapter. Just space. Emptiness. And when you've spent your whole life navigating chaos, that kind of silence can feel disorienting. I'd gotten so used to surviving that I didn't really know how to just be. And then came the grief. Not for them exactly, but for the version of me that kept trying. For the little girl who just wanted to be heard. For all the birthdays where I made my own cake, all the moments I swallowed my pain to keep the peace, all the times I told myself, next time will be different. I started having flashbacks at night. Not of the fights, but of the in-between moments, the ones that made it hard to trust myself. Like when Mom stayed up with me while I had the flu in 6th grade. Or when Dad taught me to drive, gently correcting my steering. Or when Leah used to sneak into my room and curl up beside me when she was scared. Those moments haunted me more than the bad ones. Because they made me question everything. What if I overreacted? What if I was too sensitive? What if I made it all worse than it really was? That's when I found a therapist. Her name was Carmen. She listened without interrupting. She never rushed to fix things. In our first session, I told her I felt like I had been living in a house where love was conditional and blame was currency. She nodded slowly and said, "You were trained to question your pain. That doesn't mean it wasn't real." I started journaling after that. Writing helped me see the patterns, the contradictions, the gaslighting I'd internalized. On paper, things became clearer. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't broken. I was hurt. And I was healing. Bit by bit, I began rebuilding myself. I picked up photography again. Something I loved as a teenager but abandoned because my family thought it was a waste of time. I joined a local hiking group, even though social anxiety made my palms sweat. I started saying yes to things I used to talk myself out of. Eventually, I landed a job at a small nonprofit. The team was kind, the work felt meaningful, and for the first time in my life I felt like I was showing up as me, not some version of myself shaped by guilt and survival. I made new friends. People who didn't want anything from me except my company. Who didn't guilt me for needing space or silence. Who checked in just to say, "Thinking of you." I didn't realize how much that mattered. Unconditional support, until I experienced it for the first time. It was strange at first to feel safe. To not be waiting for the rug to be pulled out. But over time I started to trust it. And more importantly, I started to trust myself. It had been about a month since I left. 32 days to be exact. I was starting to settle into a rhythm. Early walks before work, weekend hikes, late-night journaling sessions where I let myself feel everything I'd been avoiding for years. For once, my life was mine. Then the email came. It showed up in my inbox like a ghost. Subject line: "Are you seriously going to keep ignoring us?" It was from Jake. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. My heart wasn't racing, I wasn't afraid. But I could already feel that cold, familiar fog starting to creep in. The one that made me question my peace, my choice, myself. The message was rambling. Disjointed. Half guilt trip, half cry for help. Mom's been in and out of urgent care with her blood pressure. Dad isn't eating. Leah's a mess, she left school. I don't know what you thought disappearing would do, but everything's gone to hell since you left. And honestly, you've always been kind of the trigger for this family. whether you meant to be or not. I reread that last line a few times. Even now, they found a way to make my absence and my past presence the reason for their collapse. It was surreal. Somehow they had missed me enough to reach out, but only to say that I was the problem. Well, again. There was a part of me, a small, aching part that wanted to respond. That wanted to ask how Mom was, to offer comfort, to prove I was a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. But that part didn't get to drive anymore. Closed the email. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat with the weight of it. Not the guilt, but the clarity. They didn't miss me. They missed what I used to carry for them. And I wasn't picking it back up that I didn't reply to Jake's email. I thought about it. More than I'd like to admit. I reread it once or twice, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel what it stirred in me. Was it anger? Pity? Regret? It was none of those, really. Just empathy. Quiet, distant kind. I knew they were hurting. I never doubted that. But I also knew their pain didn't justify the years they spent piling theirs onto me. I could understand where it came from without making myself responsible for it. For the first time, I let the silence be my answer. Still, I found myself writing just for me. A letter I'd never send. Dear Jake, I hope Mom gets better. Really do. Hope Dad eats. I hope Leah finds her footing. But I also hope you realize this isn't happening because I left. It's happening because I was never supposed to be the one holding the whole thing together in the first place. You all wanted someone to carry the weight of your chaos, your grief, your fear. And I did for a long time. Until it started crushing me. Until I realized I was disappearing inside it. You say I was the trigger. Maybe I was. Because sometimes the truth is the loudest sound in a silent room. And my leaving forced you all to hear yourselves clearly. For once. I didn't leave to punish you. I left to save myself. And honestly, I wish it hadn't taken me so long. I folded the page and slid it into my journal. I didn't need to send it. That was the thing about healing. It stopped being about convincing anyone else of my worth. They taught me I wasn't worth loving. That love had strings, conditions, and consequences. That I was only valuable when I was absorbing everyone else's pain. I had to leave to learn I was worth loving. And now that I knew that, there was no going back. Strange how quiet freedom can be. Not loud or triumphant. Just steady, like a calm tide finally pulling you to shore after years of treading water. I'm not bitter. Thought I would be. I thought walking away would harden me, that I'd become cold or angry. But that's not what happened. What happened was peace. Real honest peace. I still have days when the past creeps in. A scent, a song, a sentence that pulls me back. And I still feel grief sometimes, not just for what happened but for what never did. For the childhood I didn't get. For the love that had too many rules. Forgiveness. Maybe one day. Maybe not. But acceptance, I have that now. I accept that they are who they are. And I accept that I am who I am without them. I've built something small but beautiful. A life that doesn't revolve around being needed, blamed, or broken. A life filled with people who ask how I'm doing and mean it. A life where I can rest without guilt. Laugh without bracing for impact. Exist without apology. Sometimes I look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. She's softer in some ways, stronger in others. Still healing, always healing. A whole. And that's enough. I used to think staying was strength. That enduring made me loyal, loving, good. But I know better now. Sometimes leaving isn't giving up. It's finally choosing yourself. That I used to believe that love meant staying, no matter how much it hurt. That family meant loyalty at the cost of your own peace. That if I just tried harder, spoke softer, forgave faster, I'd finally be enough. But the truth is, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see you clearly. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I finally started caring about myself. The moral: you don't owe anyone your suffering just because they share your blood. And choosing peace over pain isn't selfish. It's survival. It's freedom. It's healing. And it's allowed.